and thank you for inviting us to talk about our topic and hopefully have some space to get questions and some conversation around our topic. Is it possible? We have this big idea of becoming an anti-racist, for-profit, for-purpose enterprise with distributed authority and power. And this is a journey that Athena Group has been an experiment from day one. It started with me. My name is Faith Trimble. I'm the founder of the Athena Group from starting, it's about 25 years ago, with really the question of, is it possible to be in a workplace and structure your work around your life instead of your life around your work? And over the last 25 years, that has kept evolving into exploration. And our exploration right now is it possible to become an anti-racist, for-profit, for-purpose enterprise with distributed authority and power? So this is a little bit of what we're going to cover. We'll start with George and I and our journeys to Athena. So as I mentioned, I'm the founder, been around 25 years. George is absolutely new to Athena. So you'll have a little bit of different perspectives of how we got to Athena, and also Evergreen's role in that, at least for me. I'm an MPA alum. Thank you, Evergreen. Yay, Evergreen. I will also talk a little bit about what we're doing, how we're living into the future of work at the Athena Group, as well as, who is the Athena Group, and, what is their vision and how are we trying to live into that in the way we're organized. And then we'll move into characteristics, some kind of real live examples of how we're living into the work within the work environment right now. I'll start, and then I'll hand this off to George, and maybe you can introduce yourself, George, at that time. Are you good with that? So a lot of people ask me, why the Athena Group? Why did you name it? George asked me that actually while we were preparing this. He goes, why Athena? And this is what I came up with. And it's been core in driving this various different ways we've been organizing over the last 25 years. When people ask me that, why Athena, I say, well, she's the goddess of divine intelligence. Like that, doesn't that explain everything? Doesn't everyone want to be the goddess of divine intelligence? But really what I see that and how I see what that means to me is this balance of compassion, power, and wisdom showing up in all that we do, that we are all leaders in our own right. I wanted to work with colleagues. I wanted to work with people that were fully and evolving as human beings. I didn't want to work with employees. I wanted colleagues to live into their own. I didn't like this idea of heroes. Like once the hero is fallen, then there are no heroes. So how can you be heroless, but a collective that actually moves ideas forward? It was important to me too, that each of us hold what traditionally may be called masculine and feminine energies, that we all have a hero inside of us. We all have playfulness inside of us. We all have power inside of us. We all have nurturing inside of us, and we all should be living into those energies in our workplace and outside of our workplace. And that I believe that change comes, well, at the beginning, I thought change happened with social activism, and learned over time that, change comes from the inside out. And so the work that the Athena Group does is all about the spectrum of inside work to the organizational health of organizations, to the collective of community engagement and how do we work together. What Evergreen did for me on this journey to Athena is, one, I was required to have an internship, and that internship happened to be at the Association of Washington Cities. And that led me to have a quite extensive network to all the cities in Washington government. I didn't even realize I had such an extensive network until I decided to leave and start this endeavor. The other is, someone may see some of my truths as weird, or like my sister says, Faith, you're not living in reality. Evergreen allowed me to explore this, what was true to me and what I wanted to bring out in the world, and then work with others to see what evolved and see what it would become. And I never really felt in a box. And even if it wasn't reality, that's okay. I could make it my reality, and I could try to make it other realities. So with that, that was my journey to Athena. George, I'll hand it off to you.
Great, thanks, Faith. My name is George Zeno, and I am now my 30th year in my career. And I like to introduce myself through a lens of liberation. I'm learning more about this concept and really trying to help people understand my bias of how I see the world, my world perspective, and then how I see my purpose. Part of my journey starts at the very beginning, which is, I was born. I'm old enough to have been born in a segregated hospital in Louisiana. And I come from a village that is a cluster of villages that were created by former slaves, which I'm a descendant of. And in those cluster of villages, there's three villages, and only one of them still exists. The other two are ghost towns, essentially, because of the environmental pollution from the PVC plant that drove the economy, as well as the chemical and oil plants around there. So I grew up in an environment that was challenging to be from the beginning. I also, come from the South in an era that was just formally ending Jim Crow, but really still practiced socially. So by the time I was 3, I knew the rules of survival as a young Black boy. That was trauma being passed down to me. And that trauma was really thinking about, how do you protect yourself in this world that was never designed for you, designed for your presence. That really came to be when our family moved from Louisiana to Kent. In the mid-70s, I was the very first Black experience for my teachers and my classmates, and those were challenging. That was a challenging environment. Those things, those experiences, really have created the foundation of my understanding about what it means for me to be on a journey. And so I look at trauma as, in fact, you're going to hear more and more about trauma-informed care, trauma-informed plans coming up. I decided to define trauma for myself. And so I could understand how the trauma experience in my life, through my family experiences, my personal experiences, I have a series of firsts, because I've typically been the only person that looked like me, have had my experiences, to walk into new environments that were not built for me. That included, my career primarily has been in higher education, working at the University of Washington, where I was the only Black Musica fundraiser at a team of 150 or so. But not only just at the University of Washington, imagine being the only person that looked like you in your profession, all of Western Canada, from Saskatchewan to BC, from Montana to Alaska. No one looked like me. My profession really wasn't prepared for me. And my profession was in philanthropy. And so I have all these concepts of being first to be a colleague, first to manage, first to seek and receive major gifts. And all those things have informed me about what my purpose really is today. And so at the University, I worked at the University of Washington for 12 years, really leading the external relations around diversity, equity, inclusion. And in that work, my responsibility was working with primarily BIPOC communities. And the efforts that I brought into the community weren't welcomed as a representative of a predominant white institution that actually that the community saw created harm. So one of the things I had to learn in this process is having to translate what people are really trying to accomplish in their lives. We can really focus on the outputs and outcomes of what people have right in front of them, but the sense of wholeness is really what's been driving me. How can I find wholeness in myself, in people, in the communities, and Earth? So the search for liberation and justice is there. That's Black liberation, is searching for this sense of wholeness. Our Native communities, their sovereignty is about healing the broken sacred circle of life that colonization brought. Those movements are about wholeness. And so my hope is that I will work on understanding my trauma, that I can understand bringing my lived experience upstream to policies and practices and design to disrupt trauma being designed into our community. And at the same time, I'm looking downstream at the community on the ground and understanding how do we repair trauma that our communities continue to stand in the aftermath of the designs and the power that we uphold. This has brought me to Athena, where I am in a space where it's the whole organization is disrupted from the regular business. And Faith is going to go through a little bit of these components. But that's the draw for me to be here at Athena, to really understand the disruption of everyday business. How do I see myself? How do I show up? How can my contributions be seen as an asset to my own community? Faith?
Thanks, George. So who is this Athena Group? What you have on the screen here is the who we are, the where we are, and what our purpose is. We are based in Olympia, Washington, which is on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, the Nisqually and Squaxin, who I have so much to learn about. I'm realizing I'm 58 years old, and I am seeing every day how much I don't know, even though I'm getting older. But who we are a for-purpose enterprise. We are self-organizing. We're trying to become anti-racist around this purpose of building the capacity for transformational change in self-systems and society. And what we believe is that if we're able to be successful in that, and not just us, but the whole ecosystem that care about developing a sustainable and inclusive economy. So essentially what our vision is of the way we want to be with each other, but also the impact of our work, we wanted to impact whoever we're around, to shift away from power over to power with. And you'll see how we're doing that organizationally, and helping to engender a world where economic prosperity for all is inevitable when social equity and environmental responsibility are local and global priorities. That they're not mutually exclusive. I sometimes I feel like people think, well, we can't have equity, we can't be environmentally responsible and still, have economic viability. And our vision is that we can, when we prioritize social equity, environmental responsibility, there will be economic prosperity. So are we there yet? Obviously not. Is Athena going to do it all by ourselves? Obviously not. We do believe we're part of a movement, and it's a part of an ecosystem that's moving in this direction. In order to do that, we kind of have to do things differently, right? That we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them. So part of that is just how are we organized? And that's what led us to becoming a for-purpose enterprise that practices something called holacracy. Now, this reminds me, I forgot to mention at the very beginning that this is not, this is just this session with George and I is just kind of a storytelling about our journeys, a little bit about how we're trying to show up differently in the world in a for-profit space and as entrepreneurs. This isn't a detailed overview of what a for-purpose enterprise is, what holacracy is, what equity is, what anti-racism is. So I don't want to give the impression that I'm going to go deep. I'm going to go very thin. And then obviously there's plenty of resources that are out there. I also don't pretend to be an expert in these areas as a for-purpose enterprise holacracy, certainly not equity and anti-racism, but we all are learning. So we're learning together, living into this different way of being. So with that, okay, what is holacracy? Holacracy is an organizational operating system that was developed kind of as a different way than hierarchy. It kind of got labeled as a flat or a non-hierarchical organizational structure, and that's not what it is at all. It can have hierarchy in it, but it actually mirrors, you notice it looks kind of like a frog cell. It mirrors our biological world where there's organs, there's skin, there's cells, it's breathing, it's changing. It's a very adaptive environment where you can live in, and it's all centered around a purpose. It's not around an individual. So Faith, I started the organization, was CEO of the organization for a very long time. Faith is not the hero of this organization. The CEO is not the role that dominates. Now, I have roles in this organization. I have roles that have quite a bit of power in the organization, but so do other people. So what this structure, what you're looking at, this egg, this frog egg, essentially, are roles. And within those roles, so each of the circles you see, those are specific roles with specific accountabilities, and in some situations, specific domains or power, decision-making power. So, for example, I might hold one role and I will live into that role, and I have a domain to make some decisions, and I will do that. And it'll look a whole lot like, oh, well, it's just the same old. Faith's the CEO doing her thing and making her decisions. There's other examples, though, that people living into their roles, I no longer have a say. I am not the one. They're the ones that are living into that role that that have the power and the authority to make decisions within that role. So there's different ways that we operate together. We process tactical meetings together. We have governance meetings instead of like once every 5 years, you do a reorg. We have governance meetings in each of the circles at least once a month, where we can tune into structurally, is there something that needs to change that help us live into our purpose better? Tactical meetings are where we have a really strong process of how do we process our tensions with each other rather than letting them boil up and turn into really toxic environments. Tensions the definition of tension from holacracy is really the space where we're at to the space to where we want to be, and that in between is that tension. So on a weekly basis, we're processing tensions about how are we trying to close that gap between what is and what could be. So that's the holacracy. We've practiced that since 2019. And we just this year moved into a for-purpose enterprise that recognizes holacracy or other self-management, distributed power kind of organizational operating systems as important, but it also looks at the company legal structure and financial structure, and it embeds distributed power in our actual legal and financial structures. And in the association circle, it recognizes the people and all the stuff we bring into an organization, a place to just be people in an organization that's outside of the systems and the policies of the organization. So that's what it is. I'm going to do a little bit of a time check because I don't want to. It's 4:30. I'm going to move along a bit quickly so we can move over to George's slides. Yeah, I wish we could talk. I wish we could talk at that point, but we're not. We're just going to keep on going. Maybe there'll be time to talk later. So, why did we do this? Well, originally, this all evolved because of the original truths that for me, I was sharing with you, my truths coming in, my, the divine intelligence that I adored about Athena. That's why we became a holacracy. That's why I decided to turn over my power to this new for-purpose enterprise and give away my power, basically. But as I'm becoming more and more aware over time about the difference between what the dominant culture norms or the white supremacy culture norms are and what the anti-racist norms are, I'm thinking, well, crud, that's what I've been seeking all along. And crud, it's not about me. This is about a lot of people, and not just me, the Athena Group that were in the Athena Group. It's like, this is society. This is social change. This is where we want to go. What I notice when I actually now see, and I'm assuming, and maybe I shouldn't assume this, but at this point, I'm not thinking that this slide isn't a surprise to a lot of you that are on this, which is big in and of itself, that this is coming to understand what the norms of white supremacy are and what the anti-racist norms are. That's a big assumption that everyone is familiar with that. If you're not, please dive deeper. But what I noticed about this is, for me, what was driving me is my lived experience around paternalism and power hoarding. So when I saw this list, I was like, yes, that's what I was reacting to and why I wanted what's on the other side, which is seen as anti-racist norms. What my learning edge is, it's like, oh, look at all these other norms that they are part of me. They are dominant in me. Things like sense of urgency, things like a fear of open conflict, right to comfort. Those are really things that I'm working on as an expansion of what the original drive for me of how we move in as an anti-racist norms and how can we do that together. So the why of the Athena Group has morphed into, and it has become supportive of the anti-racist norms, knowing full well that we are not there yet. That there's a lot of work that we need to do at the Athena Group that I personally have to do. But that is the why behind the organizational culture, because it gives us some adaptivity. It gives us some flexibility. It distributes, if we can get it, if we can do it right, it distributes power. It can create the pathway for us to live into the anti-racist norms. I'm going to pass through the next slides. What I wanted to do was align our Athena Group's values with anti-racist norms and how it's showing up in holacracy. Maybe I thought this really was 2 hours. I don't know, but it's not. Thank goodness. So I'm just going to go through quickly here. So some of our, and I'll land on our last value. We have 5 values. We value curiosity. We value, we value awareness, connection, equity, and wholeness. And I'll stop here to say that wholeness is really that belief in that ecosystem, that we're part of this ecosystem where we're interdependent. We bring our strengths, things live and die. The old is composted into the new, and we're adaptable and living into the wholeness of who I am, who George is, who, when we're in work, when we're outside of work, when we're together as the Athena Group, bringing all of us into our work and into our lives, and continuing to move towards the big vision. George, I'm going to hand this off to you now. I didn't move that one slide, so I don't know if you want me to. Okay.
Good. Yeah. Thanks, Faith. So I have a few slides here that I wanted to go through, and I'll go through them quickly because I am really about dialogue, and hope that this has sparked some interest in learning more, or if you want to participate and add to some of this information, we welcome that as well. So a framework that Athena is developing both internally and with our clients is this spectrum of action that we are seeing, that's forming in our society, how society is organizing, and how society needs to be more accountable to what is being produced to solve the inequities in our communities. And so one of the things to pay attention to is that we're now in the 4th industrial revolution. So this 4.0 you're going to see popping up everywhere. You'll see it in government 4.0, public administration 4.0, philanthropy 4.0, public health, go on and on and on. And this is the future of work. And we're in some components of this already, but it's important to better understand that it's ecosystem forming. It's about networks and collaboratives. It's about co-creating, system thinking. It's really thinking about asking who's missing, and from a framing of a concept of whole people create whole communities who are going to create a whole planet. And so you should be seeing more things about circular economy, refuse, reuse, recycle. What are we doing to draw an understanding of what more could we be doing with the materials we already have? Can we reuse those things? Ecosystem goal making is going to be very important. Understanding that if you are part of an organization, that if you're setting goals for your institution, and those goals cannot be attributed towards something greater than yourself, then you are in egocentric goal making. And that's not being accountable to community. In fact, one of those status quo things that we see in design, especially about strategic planning, is that we like to create our own mission, vision, our goals, objectives, and then we decide, okay, how we measure impact. And reality is that means that we're creating our own accountability system, and we have the ability to pat ourselves on the back and define what progress is. That's being disrupted now. And so the thought is that in the center of this ecosystem are humans. And to better understand that what we do as people who have the ability to design and create choice for others, who have to react to what's being produced in our communities, is part of the disruption that we have to be mindful of. So this disrupt harm upstream means all of us are bringing our own inequities, our bias into our work, into our design. And it's incredibly important for us to better understand what that all means. And so we're going to get even more particular around what does strategic planning look like? How is it trauma informed? That are we really addressing root causes? When we talk about system transformation or disrupting our current systems, systems are people and our behaviors. And so that's the critical component of what's really important about this concept of upstream. All of us that have that ability to impact for others. We're also looking at downstream, those people on the ground closest to the challenge. Instead of looking at from a lens of charity or fixing, how do we better understand how to repair the harm that's being produced from upstream? So what does that mean now? That means that we are looking at culturally rooted practices. You're going to certainly see that in behavioral health as we see the opioid and fentanyl crisis continue to increase, and realizing that behavioral health services were never designed for people like me, and being inclusive of my body and my concept of spirit and soul that I bring to bear. We're also going to be looking at more sustainable solutions, and how do we understand what how we can be more equitable? Do we have enough? As in, when can we recognize we have enough? You're going to see more concept about asset-based approach. Asset-based meaning that we already have a number of resources that are already in our community, including people. Instead of looking at my identity, my culture, my language as a barrier, how can you learn to leverage me as an asset? You know, one of the reasons why I decided to leave higher ed is because my community needs more technical assistance from people that look like me, who have the ability to translate all those nuances around the environment to help drive change in our communities. A critical component of this work right now is recognizing that institutions segregate people. They put a bias label of employee on us as we walk through the door, and they erase the identities behind us. And so our organization could be working on Black home ownership, but we're not even looking at our Black employees and asking, can they afford a home themselves? We're targeting someone else. We've erased those identities. And so now what we're seeing and really pushing is an understanding that employees are actually your first line of community. It's your first line of accountability. So how can we look at employees as critical capital, as assets in our community? Accountability is at the forefront. We're talking about everything from ethics to how you show up. How are you really, your values are stated one way. Values are just containers. Your principles are actually the activation of those values, right? So for example, that if you say that our value is honesty, well, your principles should be about something like, we don't lie. You know, be very clear and intentional around that. In strategic planning, we're seeing accountability at the forefront. Community is going all the way through from the point of concept of design all the way to the understanding of business implementation. We're also seeing the rise of these agreements and MOUs around how we can learn how to learn together. How can we give each other space and grace? How can we recognize that I have a truth that hasn't been reconciled, and how can we move forward on that? Decision making is at the forefront of all this work today. Faith talk about hierarchy and power and control. You know, shifting power really is at the forefront of inclusive decision making. So we're looking at how are we making decisions? Are we looping back to understand how we observed our environment? Who oriented us to the challenge? How do we make a decision? And then that act that we created from that decision. Every single one of those 4 steps, observe, orient, decide, and act, has a loop back to community to better understand that the decision that we're making is transparent, and we can try to account for our bias. The other part of this last part is really the transformational orientation that's happening. Of course, AI is being extremely disruptive in a number of different ways, but we also need to talk about edge computing. Edge computing is this concept that I can bring, like my iPhone, my smartphone, is actually going to have its own cloud server, essentially. I can hold a significant amount of information. The advancement of 5G means that I can be more mobile. Well, that's going to disrupt all kind of ways that we approach community in our work and business. And so the staying in brick and mortar is going to be reduced. That means that an ambulance is going to have is going to be a mobile hospital, essentially, that they can go out and be in place, in community, doing the work where the community needs it the most. But it also goes back to accountability. Now communities are going to be able to monitor for themselves, going to be able to track information that they think is important for their well-being and advancement. So these are some of the frameworks where we're working internally and externally with our clients that we thought we'd share with you that we think is important. Faith, next, please. So what we're also seeing now, both internally for ourselves, but also here in Washington State, is this framework called PAIR, pro-equity, anti-racist, or anti-racism. And this concept is really an ecosystem that's really looking at those upstream movements we just talked about, which is we have these critical decision points in our operations. This is specifically in government, but this translates to essentially all businesses. In these decision-making areas, we must be mindful of how are we driving equity, and are we disrupting the racist structures, the status quo that was designed around originally, right? So the state has identified 15 social determinants of equity. All these equity determinants are indicators that around community well-being, but those community well-being indicators help us better understand our own life expectancy. So if you look at life expectancy in West Bellevue, like Medina, and then you look at the life expectancy of a community like in Auburn, you're going to see a like 9-10-year age difference in life expectancy. Why? Is because of the determinants of equity help us better understand where an index people are, and then that gives us a better understand how to read the community, how to sense what their needs are, and then look toward our service lines, our business lines, the way that we behave, how we make those decisions to respond to those needs, moving away from that command and control. We're going to tell you what to do versus we're listening, we're observing, and then now going back to our instruments and then bringing those back up to the community to help solve. So what does that look like? And so what I decided to do is give you this insight look at a strategic planning wireframe that we're working on with a partner to better understand. This is for a public health client. And what you're seeing outlined here that really I want you to focus on is that instead of objectives as a whole, we're looking at system enablers. So what are those areas in our systems that allow for the outcomes really to be realized? What in our behavior, our readiness helps us better understand how we can get to those outcomes. Those outcomes must be viewed through the lens of these 15 social determinants. And so no longer are we able to just create our own goals and say, well, this sounds really good, and so we should do this, we should do that, and then we're going to measure this from what we just did as an output. Now, what's being asked through an anti-racist lens and this pro-equity lens is to bring those determinants down into your core channels of operations. And then that's going to influence your actions. Those actions need to go back up to those outcomes and measure those outcomes. What's also happening is that those outcomes, then are created out of those service lines, right? So I gave you a little map to the right here around those determinants, and then those service lines on the that circle on the right are actually all lined up on the bottom here. So now we're looking at our measuring evaluation components through these service lines. And so that's the critical component. That's the big change now in strategic planning. And Faith, you want to advance this last one, and then we'll get to some questions and dialogue here. So what does this look like internally to us? So I just put those determinants in the middle there because we too, even through a holacracy concept that's not traditional what we see in business, we have to be accountable to our decisions and decision making. And so we're learning to use these determinants of equity to help guide us in the right decision making. A really quick example of that was just this week. We were in a budget meeting and we're trying to figure out what do we do with the little extra resources that we have. You know, and it was about early childhood education. Should we be sponsoring a conference there? And you know, the question really is that how does early childhood impact our community? What's our role as someone trying to be anti-racist organization, trying to support some of those critical foundational areas that we know that our community needs? We already know who's going to prison by third grade. It's those who most likely didn't get access to early childhood education. That's the conversation we had around making that critical budget decision. So that's just a really quick look at some of this in action and practice. And so we just want to give you a really quick overview of this work. But you know, the most important thing for us right now is to be in dialogue with you, and we hope that we can have a great conversation for the last few minutes.